At NBT Bank, we believe that if you focus on what matters, the rest will fall into place. And for us, that place happens to be at the top as one of Forbes' world's best banks. NBT ranked high in overall satisfaction, along with customer service, reliability, and digital banking tools. So whether you need personal or business solutions, financial advice, or the latest mobile banking technology, you can be sure with NBT, you don't just have a great team, you have one of the best.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 21st Century Business Forum. I'm your host, Clay Young. This morning, we are excited to have with us the CEO of what Forbes has identified as the largest domestic hunger relief organization and second largest U.S. charity in the nation. Claire Babineaux-Fontenot of Feeding America is with us. Now, the organization provides more than 4 billion meals to more than 40 million people across the U.S. Claire is a former corporate executive. She spent 13 years as a part of Walmart's leadership team, with her most recent role being executive vice president and global treasurer, leading teams across 28 countries. She was also named Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People of 2020. Claire, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We're happy to learn from you. So, let's start at the beginning. You spent all this time at Walmart as an EVP, and you were treasurer there, and you're doing so many great things on a wide spectrum. And now you've transitioned away from that. Give me the story behind that.
I'm really excited that I have an opportunity to talk to your audience, and honored that you think that I have something worth listening to. And something to say. So thanks so much for having me on the show. So I think your specific question was about my journey from Walmart to CEO of Feeding America.
Right.
It was not something that I must say that I expected even myself, but I had came up in a uniquely large family, one of 108 children through birth, adoption, and foster care. I've always known about the needs and the wants that exist in our society. I was raised in the state of Louisiana, where I learned a sense of duty and the honor that there is in service. And then I got all of these remarkable opportunities. So I had the chance to do things that my parents only dreamed of. Believe it or not, graduating from high school was something that eluded my parents. And yet I graduated from high school. I went to undergrad. I got a law degree. And then I got another law degree, which my mother never understood what was wrong with the first one. And with all of that, I prepared myself for a career in the law. So I moved along. I worked in government. I worked in Big Four accounting because I was a tax lawyer. I worked at Adams and Reese right there in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was partner in charge of the capital city offices for Adams and Reese. Walmart was my client. And they, after working with them for a while, they asked if I'd come in-house. So there I found myself. I'm at Walmart, moving through, matriculating, if you will, at Walmart. After 13 years, I found myself in a place I'd never even dreamed. I was at Fortune 1, and I was the executive vice president of finance and treasurer. And then I learned that I had cancer, and everything changed. I asked myself a really important question. What if the best thing I could ever do professionally were the best thing I could ever do at Walmart? Would that be okay? And my answer was no. As much as I loved that organization for all the investments that were made in me, I knew that I needed to go and do something that was different. I wanted to spend the rest of my life in service to others. I wanted to use everything that I'd learned, all of those great opportunities that I'd had. I wanted to leverage all of those in the work that I would do next. So when I left Walmart I think some people called it a retirement event, but I thought, I'm not retiring. I'm leaving Walmart, but I'm not retiring. But at that event, when I was leaving, I remember speaking to the audience there of peers and colleagues and sharing with them that up until that moment, I made all of these head decisions, and then I tried to engage my heart. But that what I was going to do next was going to be a heart decision where I tried to engage my head. And that's exactly what I've been able to do at Feeding America. In fact, not only do I engage my head and my heart, I engage my hands and my feet and my back. There's a lot to be done, but I feel so honored that I get a chance to do it.
So, I can already tell right out of the gate that this one is going to be one for the ages, just listening to your sincerity and how deeply thought out your answers are. Before I get into leadership style, let's talk about something that I think is very important. This is an audience of CEOs, C-suite folks, and people who want to get into business or understand it from the 50,000 feet level all the way down to the ground floor. The importance of purpose in what you are doing seems to drive where you are now. And I would like you to talk through that, because purpose, I think, is a very important cultural pillar inside of any organization. What is the purpose? So could you expound upon the importance of knowing your purpose and using it to drive whatever it is you do?
Well, Clay, you are astute in that observation. That's absolutely critically important to me and to how and where I thrive. I think it's important, though, to mention that you can find purpose in for-profit organizations, and not everybody has to have the same path that I've had into nonprofit. In fact, we only get to have one CEO at a time, so I don't want that much competition for my current job. So, but I will say purpose matters. So when I was at Walmart, as an example, one of the ways that I found purpose in the work that we did, I ran a large part of the finance organization. A particular focus early on was on tax. And I kept tax, but my responsibilities increased. But when I was in the tax department, sometimes we had members of the team who struggled with, well, why does this matter? What's this really about? What's it really for? And what was a guiding principle for the work that we did at Walmart was everyday low cost. So we got to help to save the company money and make it more efficient, led to everyday low prices. Everyday low prices change people's lives. So people in rural America, for instance, which is where I'm from and where Walmart got started, got access to things that otherwise they simply would not have gotten access to. But for Walmart being in that town, people got jobs that they otherwise wouldn't have had, but for Walmart being in that town, and all the things that come around, all of the other businesses that come around a Walmart. So when I was there inside of the for-profit space, I sought purpose as a leader. I sought to inspire the members of my team with what that galvanizing purpose was. And now I do it differently with a different purpose, but both are important.
Let's talk about your leadership style. And because you referenced a second ago instilling purpose into your team, how would you describe your leadership style?
And it's good that we talked about Walmart earlier. And I want to go back to Walmart for just a second, because I think I found my leadership voice at Walmart and the approach that I was going to take with leadership while I was there. So when I started at Walmart, I was hired for a job that I felt confident I had been preparing for 16 years for. It was a tax technical role. And I thought, yes, I can do that job. So when I said yes to the job, I was saying yes to a job that I felt abundantly prepared for. On my way there, in other words, before I actually started the job, my team doubled. Within 4 months, my team doubled again. Within about another 4 months, team doubled again. Within a year and a half, I had gone from being in a role, well, I felt I knew the subject matter like the back of my hand, to a role where I was forced to leverage other people. That the organization was no longer asking to benefit mostly from the benefit from my own substantive or technical expertise, but instead was asking to benefit from how I might leverage the expertise and the wherewithal of other people. It was at Walmart that I learned that I needed to build diverse teams, that I needed to find people who were different than I was, that I needed to leverage those differences in the work. It was at Walmart that I heard for the first time in a business context this notion of servant leadership. which definitely informs my approach to leadership. They talked about it a lot there, and I didn't know what it meant. So I looked it up and I found out that there's this guy, Dr. Greenleaf, who had established 10 principles of servant leadership. And at its core, Clay, what it's really about is, if you can imagine a pyramid, right? I really did, as a lawyer, I thought I know I was a good lawyer. I thought I was a good person. I'd like to think that I was. And I thought I was a good leader going in, but I definitely had a hierarchical view of leadership. So if you could imagine a pyramid, there I was sitting on top of the pyramid, and there were the people on the team. They were there in service to my vision. And in some ways, I kind of think I thought, although I would never have said that they were there in service to me. And at Walmart, I realized that pyramid had to be inverted.
Right.
And that servant leadership is about me in service to them and we in service to purpose. So it was transformational for me to have gone there. And I've taken those learnings, those lessons with me in the work that I do today. And it has paid for itself so many times over. I can't imagine being in the middle of a global health pandemic that came along with a global food crisis, not having embraced the notion of servant leadership and not having built a diverse and inclusive team.
It's interesting. We last year spoke with Ulysses Jr. Bridgman as a part of our series, and he talked about in his transition away from the NBA into being an executive, he too spent some time at Walmart and learned about the culture of putting the customer and the people on the front lines first. And I agree that inverted pyramid is so important in an operation. You know, what led you to step away from such a high profile job at such a big company?
Well, I think I've alluded to it earlier. I'll go back and talk about it, maybe go a little bit deeper with it. Mm-hmm. So I have no aversion to wealth. Let me be clear. I am definitely a capitalist. Truth be told, while I was at Walmart, I achieved some financial success that I never even imagined that I would. And with that came choices that I could make, the privilege of being able to make choices. And as I acquired more wealth, my husband and I acquired more wealth, we were better positioned to live out our dreams and to also help to enable the dreams of other members of our family and different people that we've met. But as I was reflecting on my own mortality, learning of my cancer, I knew that that was not going to be enough. I knew that for me, I was going to need to go feet first into this space similar to the space that I am in today. I didn't know that I was going to go to Feeding America. I didn't know Feeding America wasn't even looking for a CEO when I left Walmart. But I knew that I was going to go into the nonprofit space, and I felt that the things that I'd learned were going to be helpful inside of that space. So that was the reason. It was that moment, a cataclysmic life event that sharpened my focus and led me to ask one of those quintessential questions. So what is all of this for? Mm-hmm. And what are we going to do? So if I get the chance, if it's in God's will that I continue to be here on this earth, what am I going to do with this time? How am I going to make all of the investments that have been made in me? How are they going to translate into value for other people? And that's what led me down this path.
You know, one of my favorite quotes is from David Viscott. And it goes like this: if you cannot risk, you cannot grow. If you cannot grow, you cannot become your best. And if you cannot become your best, you cannot be happy. But it all starts with taking a step out on your own. And that's what you're talking about. You know, you've transitioned into this role now. As you have done it, what are some things that you have learned that you may not have anticipated on your way into it?
Well, there are certainly things that have been validating, and then there have been things that I had no clue about and that I've learned. So what was validating was I knew coming in, because of the experiences that I had at Walmart, I knew that I needed to build a diverse team. I knew that bringing in people with skill sets that I didn't have was going to be critical to whatever success we had. I didn't anticipate that we're going to have a global health pandemic and a global food crisis, but I did know that there was important work to be done. So from very, very early on, I assessed the team. I came to understand what our strengths and where our struggles were, where our gaps were. And I started filling in those gaps with additional leaders who brought different perspectives and different skill sets to bear. So I knew that was going to be important. I didn't know how hard, how resilient, how hard they worked, how resilient they were as a network, the Feeding America Network. So it was in the middle of the pandemic when so many of us had the benefit, the privilege of working from home, that it so crystallized for me in whose company I was serving. Our food banks never closed. So no matter what that meant, no matter what the risk was to their personal safety, they were out there on those front lines, and they stayed out there, and they still are. And they've always been out there. I don't know that I fully process, and maybe I don't even now, what that means, what kind of people it takes to do that. I've seen so many examples of heroism since I've moved into this work, real heroism among people who don't expect any cameras, don't expect any praise. They get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, they wash their faces, put their clothes on, and they go to work. It has been inspirational to get to do this work alongside them. There's so many aspects of what it means to be a food banker that I didn't understand. So there are lots of details and particulars of food banking that I'm still learning, to be sure. But I'm so inspired by that really important set of things that I learned. And then inside of the pandemic, there was something I hoped was so, and I believed was so, but I now know it's so. Before the pandemic started, I was privy to all of these numbers, and I'm kind of a numbers person, and I saw that at that time, nearly 40 million people in this country were food insecure. And I remember thinking, America must not realize this. Because it's avoidable, it's a solvable challenge. It's hard, but it's solvable. People just must not know. So I started thinking about being a kid and how often I went to some friend's house and we're around the dinner table and they're being a picky eater, and their mom, usually the mom or their mom or a dad, says, "You better eat that food. They're hungry kids in Africa. You better eat that food. They're hungry kids in China." My mom never had to say that to us because I've known my whole life there are hungry kids right here in the United States of America. In fact, right at 12 million hungry kids right here. So during the pandemic, so before that, I thought, okay, if America knew what was happening, America would step up. And I was right. The outpouring of support that we've received during this pandemic, the countless acts of generosity, of grace, of kindness that I've witnessed, while in the background of what I'm experiencing, we also have all of this imagery of division. The imagery of division, I know it's real, but I also know that imagery of unification and of being a neighbor in community, that's real too. So that was an important thing that I'd hoped was true, that I now know is true. And when I'm tired, I think about moments like that. I think about people on the front lines. I think about people in need of help, who need a hand up. And I think about the millions of people who've been stepping up to try to help. And it inspires me, invigorates me to try to be helpful too.
You know, I'd like to drill down on that a little bit. Talk about some of the challenges that you are facing, because these numbers have increased, and then there is the impact of the pandemic. What are some of the challenges you're facing in building out your long-term strategy and reaching your goals and doing what you're doing? And that's trying to bring down the number of hungry people in the country.
Well, let me start with just a little context, maybe. So to begin with, in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, in the calendar year 2020, 60 million people turned to the charitable food system for help. 60 million people. Our network of 200 member food banks and over 60,000 agency partners, over 2 million volunteers, and then all of these new donors and members of the American public who are stepping up. Between the summer of 2020 and the summer of 2021, we provided 6.6 billion meals.
Wow.
6.6 billion meals. One of the challenges that are inherent in our work, though, is that after that meal is over, the time will come when the hunger is back. So one of the most pervasive challenges that we need to take on as a society is, how do we ensure that chronic hunger does not continue to be the legacy that people pass on from generation to generation to their family, to their children? And as I said before, these are things that we can overcome, but it actually starts with us deciding it's unacceptable that in this country, richest country in the history of civilization, in this country, the most generous country in the whole world, that in this country, that is unacceptable. And when we truly make that decision, there's nothing we can't do together. So those are the types of obstacles. Now, of course, I didn't mention, let's go back to 2020. I talked about how all of these heroes that I've met throughout our network and inside of these communities, there have been barriers to getting people access to food. So you've got supply chain challenges. When those supply chain challenges are hitting a store, if you think about the fact that manufacturers and retailers are a significant part of the donated food that we receive. If they don't have food on their shelves, then they don't have food to donate, right? We also move a lot of food across the country. When freight costs are up, they're up for us. And in the middle of this pandemic, we're actually buying 58% more than we bought before. And grocery prices are at a 50-year high. So all of those things are challenges. But I don't know if you can tell, I am far from daunted. These are challenges that we can overcome. And I'm optimistic that we will. I'm going to get to be a part of it. So it's exciting.
Listen, for those watching in other parts of the country, you're from Louisiana. We're just built different down here. Nothing pushes us down and keeps us down.
With that statement, I am.
Listen, you were recently able to secure a $100 million donation from Jeff Bezos, and it's fantastic. How do you go about building trust with CEOs to get such large contributions? And talk about speaking their language, because you absolutely do.
Yeah. So the first thing is, let's unpack that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And I love long form interviews because we can unpack stuff. So
That's
thanks,
right.
Clay, for giving me the space to do that. But so let's begin with when I was doing the analysis of where I aspired to go and how I aspired to serve. One of the things that mattered to me a lot was, what is the fiscal health of that organization? What kind of stewards of investments is that organization? What kind of track record does the organization have? I'm sure Jeff Bezos cared about that. I'm sure it mattered to him that we are rated the highest Charity Navigator rating that is available. I'm sure that it mattered that his investment was going to be put back in things that were tangible to him. So we turned that investment around. So we received $100 million. And within, let's just go ahead and call it within 2 months, but it was less than that, 100% of the $100 million had been reinvested inside of communities from the time of the initial phone call to that moment.
That's
less
impressive.
than 2 months. So he knew we had the apparatus, the infrastructure to actually do things that matter with investments. I know he knew what our reputation was. We know a few people in common who I believe helped him to understand who we were. I'd like to think that I have a bit of a brand. I know that I work hard, and I know I want to do the right thing. And I know that I know how to build great teams, and I know how to be a great financial steward. When I work in an organization like this one, it makes all of that so much easier. So I believe all of that contributed to it. And when you talk about speaking the language in particular, I was actually, before I left Walmart, I was on the foundation board at Walmart. So one of the things that I did on the foundation board, in fact, I was on the executive committee of the foundation board at Walmart. So I was a part of some of the big decisions that were being made about how Walmart was going to invest, do its charitable donations. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year Walmart invests. And I got to be at the table participating in some of those decisions about where the investments would be made. While I was there, I got to know more about Feeding America, although that's a whole nother story. My introduction to Feeding America came as a child. But in that moment when I was at Walmart, I actually got to look under the hood at Feeding America. I got to see what kind of fiscal stewards they were even back then. And that was a part of my analysis. And I also knew, having been inside of a major company, that the work that we do is not every company can figure out how what we do is complementary to what they care about. Now, I think most companies ought to be able to figure it out, because hunger is so fundamental that whatever it is that you care about, it probably impacts whatever that is. Mm-hmm. But we work hard at understanding our donors, helping our donors to understand us. And I'm talking a lot about our major donors who make these huge investments in our work. And we look at, what is your strategy? How do you want to make an impact? And then how is that complementary to what we're doing? Let me give you one quick example, maybe, Clay. As an example, there are organizations that are very, very invested in eliminating waste. You may well be aware that it's estimated that somewhere around 40% of the food that we bring into our houses, we waste. But not counting household waste, over 72 billion pounds of perfectly edible food, not counting household waste, go to landfills.
72, yes. One more time?
Over 72 billion pounds of perfectly edible food, not counting household waste, go to landfills.
Wow.
While tens of millions of people don't have enough food to eat. So, which organization, Clay, do you suppose is the largest food waste recovery organization in the United States of America? I'll give you one guess. Feeding America. We are the largest food waste recovery organization in the United States of America. We recover billions of pounds of food that would otherwise go to waste. Instead of go to waste, it fills the bellies of little kids.
Right.
It eases the spirits of moms. So many people who rely upon for help have at least one job. Some of the people who come to us for help, and that's a bit of the myth, Clay, some of the people who come to us for help have more than one job. So imagine a mom with two jobs that still can't make ends meet, trying to figure out, how am I going to feed my babies? That's something I've never had to wonder about. Not one moment have I had to wonder, how am I going to feed my babies? And there are so many moms out there who do. And what about those grandparents that are out there who, over the holidays, for instance, so around April, we're looking at Easter, and how you want to be able to invite the family to your house, to have the big meal at grandma's. So many seniors across this country and particularly in the state of Louisiana, don't have enough to eat. They're making decisions like, am I going to pay for my medicine? Am I going to pay for the light bill? Or am I going to buy food? So imagine what it does to a grandmother's spirit when she can't invite the family over for the big Easter feast because she doesn't even have enough for herself to eat. Those are the types of challenges that people are confronting right now. And again, and 72 billion pounds of perfectly edible food, not counting household waste, goes to landfills.
Wow.
So when I say that the work that we do is hard, but that it's solvable, it's because it is.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is matching. Some of it is about heightened understanding that there's even a problem to start with.
Right.
Some of it is about policy. Some of it is about money. Some of it is about food. Some of it is about systems. It's complex, but it's doable. So I hope that when people hear me, when they understand my story, when I have an opportunity like this remarkable opportunity to speak to this group, I hope that they understand that whatever it is that you apply yourself to, I think if there's a secret to my own success, I would say it is that I work inside of my passions.
You know, it's not lost on me the impact you have on corporate America and now America as a whole as a female in leadership. It's a tremendous example for other women, both in for and nonprofit sectors, but also for young women to let them know that you can achieve anything a man can. You can soar to those levels. Talk to me about being such an example for so many.
You know, I like the way that you characterized it, because I do think of myself as someone who could provide an example to people who think maybe in the backs of their minds that where you start will define where you go. My life is a life that shows that that's not true. I'm the granddaughter of sharecroppers on both sides. Neither of my parents were able to graduate from high school. And yet I've had these remarkable opportunities to lead, to learn. I've been nourished by other people, and I've had these incredible chances to serve. So I hope that when people hear my story, that they can see themselves inside of that story as a person of color, as a woman, or if you're not a woman or you're not a person of color, as a person who started out with I started out with a plastic spoon in my mouth, not a silver one, that in this country, there still are these remarkable opportunities to flourish. And when you're feeling down and when bad stuff comes your way, like for instance, cancer. So that's not the kind of thing that I would ever hope for, to be sure. And yet, but for my being diagnosed with cancer, I know I would not be sitting here right now having this conversation with you. So sometimes in the middle of hardship can come triumph. So I hope that people hear that and see that and feel that in my story, that if I can achieve, they can too.
I think it's amazing. Everything about your personal story and where you are now, it's amazing. Just one more thing before we close. What's one book on leadership that you would recommend?
A book on leadership. That's an interesting thing, because I've read so many books, especially of late. But oddly enough, it probably isn't thought of as a book on leadership. But one of the books that I go to a good bit is Animal Farm. George Orwell and Animal Farm. And inside of it, it tells a tale of how sometimes inside of our circumstances, that there's some bad things that can happen, right? And that when people judge each other harshly, that sometimes what we need to be doing is putting a mirror up to ourselves. For me, that story is a humbling one, a story that talks about what the dangers are, but then I come out of it saying, what are the things that I'm going to do to ensure that I do not become like the people inside of the story, that I flourish, but more importantly, that I lift up other people along the way. I remember probably the most profound thing in that book for me was when in the Cover of Darkness, when there had been these rules of engagement that all of the animals on Animal Farm had agreed to. And one of them said, all animals are equal. And then under the cloak of darkness, certain animals who could write came in and drew a line and said, some animals are more equal than others. I don't think it's a good idea for us to pretend that bad things can't happen. I think it's an important thing for us to be aware of that, but then be a part of good things happening. I just saw something, if you'll indulge me, Clay, that I thought was just so powerful. I was watching this movie recently, streaming, the way we do today, streaming a movie. And inside of it, someone said, well, what if every time something negative happens to you, you gave the universe back 2 positives? How would that look? And what would that mean for the world if we could get that campaign going? So that's something that I certainly think about too. I'm trying to put 2 good things back into the universe. So many good things have been poured into me. So I know that's not a traditional leadership book, but it is one that really resonates so deeply with me as a cautionary tale. I am an optimistic person by design. I'm hopeful about what the future holds for us, but I know that we're going to get the future that we earn. I want to be a part of us earning a future that's bright.
It's interesting, though, if I just may say, with all that you've been through, I do find it consistent throughout history that so many people have achieved so much who have also been through so much. And it's some of the major companies and huge civilization-changing inventions and moments have been caused or led by people who have come out of the near embers of disaster, even in their youth. Yeah. And why do you think there is such a consistency among people who have achieved so much? That they don't have it easy. Why do you think that is?
Well, by the way, I think everybody goes through things. Some of us talk about them. Right. Some of us don't talk about them, but everybody goes through things. Everybody has something hard that they've been through, and yet they've gotten up the next day. I think that's true for every single one of us. I did do some research as I was at Walmart and wondering, what are they thinking at year 1.5 when I was about to be the global chief tax officer? And I'm thinking, did they not see my resume? Don't they understand what I actually did for a living before I got here? And I remember I did some research on what are the common traits among people who are wildly successful. And then people get to define success for themselves. Although I do like that Ralph Waldo Emerson definition of success, but be that as it may, however it is that people define it, that the common trait that people have who are wildly successful is that they expect to win. People who expect to win usually do. And for some people, I think to the question that you had asked before, for some people, failure is not an option. The stakes are so high. They've got someone relying on them, counting on them. For me, I've got parents who invested so much in me to get to do things they never even imagined that their child would get to do. I needed to be a manifestation of their investment. So people have different reasons why sometimes they refuse to fail. But people who win expect to win. If you expect to win, you usually do.
That is a perfect place to wrap. Wow, that's fantastic. This was fun. I feel like I've known you 20 years already. It's been 45 minutes.
I feel the same way. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. Appreciate it. And thanks for allowing my voice to be lifted. I appreciate that.
I'd also like to thank you, our guests, for joining me this morning, and thank all of our sponsors for making this episode possible. Please join us next month when our guest is fantastic chef and TV personality and businessman, Emeril Lagasse. See you then.